My name is Natalie Cruz. I work here at the library, and we do these programs once a month, and I'm really excited to have these guys here today. Last year, and a lot of programs yet this year, are about veterans programs, and I have a real passion for that. So glad that all of you came out tonight. I'm really excited about what they have to say. I'm going to give them a proper introduction here. We have Chris Pettit behind the TV there. He was hired as the executive director in March of 2020 at the Highground. He was born and currently resides in Osseo, Wisconsin. At age 17, he joined the United States Marine Corps, and for the next 23 years, he served as a radio operator, electro-optical repair technician, MOS instructor, and ordnance chief. His service brought him to 8 different countries, 3 combat tours, and 13 relocations. Chris retired in 2014 as a master sergeant and returned to Wisconsin with his wife Bonnie and 2 children, while their oldest daughter moved to California. For the next 5 years, he worked in the mining industry until the opportunity arose to support military veterans and their families. Chris enjoys woodworking, hunting, and the outdoors. This here is Teresa Hebert, and she started working at the Highground in 2012. She's the curator of the Highground Museum and coordinates educational programs and several programs to support veterans' mental health and PTSD MST management. Her goal and passion lies with preserving the stories of those who served, as well as the effect on their families and communities, the physical preservation of artifacts that are donated to the museum, and being able to create and present educational exhibitions on the human cost of war. Teresa has 3 daughters and lives near Greenwood. She's a self-proclaimed history and science geek who also loves to spend time appreciating nature and learning more about getting back to our roots. So please welcome them.
You know, I tested this before everybody showed up and it worked just fine.
It was on, right, a second before you looked at it, it was going.
Nothing's
Off
like that.
Wiggle the mosa. Cutting into our time, Teresa. We're gonna have to cut something else out. Seriously?
Well, on the easels that we brought are some news clippings and information about the dedication of the park in 1988. And you can see by reading the articles, if you've got time tonight, the effect on the community and at large and the veterans that attended the dedication. There were over 5,000 at the dedication on September 18th of 1988. And it shows the emotions that were at the dedication after the struggle of getting the park, getting everything to fall into place, and that the Vietnam veterans especially had a place to call their own and to be recognized and remembered. And here is a drawing by, it was one of the founding board members, Howard Scherf, and there's a photograph actually of this without the Hueys, but there was a veteran in a wheelchair that was watching the construction of our dump tribute, and that was captured in a photograph, and then he was inspired to do the coming home sketch of the founders of the board for getting the park together to start the park were primarily Vietnamese, and there were other notable businessmen and ex-politicians from the state of Wisconsin. They're spread all over Wisconsin. So we had, they had a lot of support around the 1983-84. But prior to that, as Chris will get into more, there wasn't support even from other veterans to get something that honored and recognized the Vietnam veterans. Countries sort of wanted to forget about it for the most part.
Anybody audio visual?
Not really, but I use that one a lot, so we see.
Here's a remote, here's a chair.
No, that's okay. I'm down here now. So
It's in the build of the library.
Do you want to go into?
So I'll get started here. You all were able to at least watch the video when you first showed up. That's kind of the overview of the park. what we're trying to get up is a PowerPoint about all of the things that we do. So the inspiration for this park actually started on a battlefield in Vietnam in 1965, where a gentleman by the name of Tom Miller and a good friend of his, Jack Swinder, were attached to a 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, and they were in the a battle of the Operation Harvest Moon. And on December 18th, 1965, was probably the heat of the battle, and it lasted over 4 hours. A lot of casualties, a lot of deaths. And Jack had actually had a shrapnel wound to his throat and subsequently died in Tom's arms. And Tom had made a silent promise to himself and Jack that when he came back to the United States, he wanted to build a small memorial in honor of his friend, so we continue to honor his service and his sacrifice. So when Tom came back from Vietnam in 1966, in that same battle, he also was blind in his right eye. When he came back to the U.S. in 1966, just like all the other veterans, he wasn't treated very kindly. And so he wasn't able to pursue his promise to Jack. And he didn't feel comfortable with doing so until 1983. In 1983, Mr. Miller got on a bicycle, them pedal things with a real narrow seat, and rode 1,244 miles around the state of Wisconsin. Each one of those miles signified the loss of the Wisconsin servicemen who was either killed or missing in action in Vietnam. 1,244. And he did this in 1993, one to raise awareness for this project that he was looking to build, and two, everything we do requires some sort of funding. So it was also a fundraising drive. And in 1984, that became, they did the first annual bicycle tour. We actually call it the Hero Tour now, where we'll talk a little bit more about that if it ever comes up in the slide, because our notes are on the slides.
Do you have the PowerPoint saved under Teresa or under the Highground?
It's on the thumb, it's on that thumb drive.
Okay, well, but it's not showing the same screen. It's like
Right.
showing up as Teresa's.
Go down to the folder down here, this folder.
It's there. It's just, it's so funny. It's a different screen here than here.
Right, we have to duplicate the screen, and I have to, if we go here, we should.
But the mouse is only showing up there.
Right, but we should be able to, if the function.
So while they're still playing with technology, which I can't stand, where did I leave off with? So in 1984, the Wisconsin Vietnam Veteran Memorial Project, Inc. became into existence. It became a 501c3. I always get those two numbers mixed up. And in that process, oh, there you go. We're there. Thank you so much.
It's like a woman.
No, it was done.
Look like a joint
But
effort.
you say you wanted a video?
Not the video.
No, I don't want the video,
Oh,
just,
okay.
just what's on the screen now, and we are
Okay,
good.
then you're good.
Oh,
All right.
yes, it is. Okay.
We are golden. Now we are moving
Clicking on
forward.
stuff.
And I'll stand behind you.
Step ahead. This is a picture of Tom Miller and his wife Rose. They actually reside in New Jersey now. And then this is one of the better pictures we have of Jack. And Jack is actually from Kansas City. Straighten that out a little bit. So like I said, we established as a nonprofit in 1984. And in 1988, we actually, we were still Wisconsin Vietnam Veterans Memorial Project, Inc., but we've kind of shortened it to the Highground. One, it's easier to say, and two, it fits on the donationary checks that, or donations that are made in. This is what the property looked like, or in the beginning process. So the site locations in 1984, or 83, when Tom was going around, there was over 50 sites around the state of Wisconsin that they were looking at possibly building a small memorial. And after about 7-8 months, it narrowed down to 5. And one of those was Adam Friendship,
Adams County by Rocha Cree, and then Taylor County.
and then Taylor County. And this one wasn't one of the sites that was even chosen. It happened to come up for sale, and a Neillsville native by the name of Don Quicker Brought the, he's a good dude. He's been with the organization since conception. He contacted the committee and said, hey, this property came up for sale. And 2 days later, they chose this site as their future site of the high ground. And it was chosen for several reasons. One, it's kind of hard to see on this view, but in the drone footage you also saw, they could see over half a mile or 500 million acres of glacial moraine, which reminded a lot of the Vietnam veterans of the landscape and topography of Vietnam. Plus, those that have served in the military understand that the high ground is a place of safety, security, and observation. And if you're ever there, you'll feel that. We're also centrally located within the state. This is one of the other factors that they thought was really neat in choosing this. We're actually 30 miles from geographical center of the state of Wisconsin. So conceptually, no matter where you live in the state, you could travel, spend a couple hours at the park, and still make it home in time for dinner. We're also away from the metropolitan area, which in a way is good because you don't have the big city crime, but you also may not have the amount of visitors that are coming, because you actually do have to travel a little bit to come to the high ground. And then the Listman Foundation in Neillsville offered to purchase the first 100 acres of land.
The purpose of the high ground, first and foremost, was to provide a safe space in the country, wide open vistas, for Vietnam veterans to come and gather and to be recognized, to also achieve some amount of healing from post-traumatic stress and other mental trauma from the military service. And as well as having an educational center, because the founding members really felt that there wasn't enough information to the public on the Vietnam War and on issues such as post-traumatic stress and the sacrifices that were made in Vietnam. So when I was looking through things, I thought that a particular speech by our then Governor Tony Earl at the groundbreaking really hit all these points really elegantly. So I wanted to share that with you. And this was from the groundbreaking October 1986, before the park was established. The war in Vietnam is over, but we know for far too many the war is still going on inside themselves. There are many who did not get the praise and gratitude they deserved in their time, but the healing process has started. We're all here today because Vietnam veterans started the healing. Vietnam veterans have chosen to make this hilltop into a memorial, a place for veterans to come together to remember, reflect, and rebuild. They have turned from bitterness to a new beginning. I think that really hit everything that they were trying to achieve. It was only 2 years before they incorporated that the Vietnam Veterans Memorial was established in Washington, D.C. So there wasn't a lot going on in the country to support Vietnam veterans until those mid-'80s, when they finally got the support.
Once the land was purchased, one of the first things we needed to have there was something to show that it was going to be a Vietnam memorial. So the actual first tribute was placed there in 1986, if I remember correctly. Is that right, Teresa? The flagpole?
Yeah.
75 foot tall, and it holds a 10 by 15 American flag and a POW flag. There was an organization in Clark County that during that process said that anytime we needed a flag, they would go purchase and get us another one. I don't think they realized that it was on a hilltop. We go through a flag a month, sometimes 2 flags a month, because it's that windy. We do have some local seamstress that volunteer their time that may make that flag just a little bit shorter and fold it over, so we can get a couple more 2-3 weeks out of it. We currently have 155 acres, and this is kind of an overhead picture of close to what it looks like now. I think this was taken in 2020. There is an additional change to this photo, and we'll see that later on in the slides. So the mission of the High Ground Veterans Park is to honor, educate, and heal. Our vision statement is to honor the sacrifice of veterans, active servicemen and women, and their families through a memorial park and our services. To educate the public about their services rendered and the hardships endured, the sacrifices made, and the human cost of and proudly paid for by our servicemen and women. And to heal veterans and their families by providing a park as a place of fellowship, support, and reflection. So in 1988, the second tribute was placed, and this tribute was actually designed by a gentleman by the name of Bob Knusik, who lives up in Rhinelander. He was a first lieutenant in the Army, and he actually molded this out of clay at Nicolay College. Then UW-Whitewater came up with 2 vans, meticulously cut it into several pieces, transported it back down to UW-Whitewater where they bronzed it. That was almost a year process. And it had the clay part, they had 24 hours so it didn't dry and crack. We watched a video on it. Wore a lot of short shorts back then and knee-high socks. But anyway, got off subject there a little bit. This is at the point of the plaza, and I'm going to read off what the stone says just in front of it because it's hard to read there, and I don't have it memorized, so bear with me. This is Fragments, Wisconsin Vietnam Veterans Memorial, honoring the men and women from Wisconsin who served in Vietnam. We left pieces of ourselves in Vietnam, and we brought parts of Vietnam home. Each fragmented figure supports the other. In a close inspection, the figure with the helmet reveals a long hair of a woman. This is the first depicted on a U.S. Veterans Memorial. Her poncho supports 1,244 rods engraved with the names of those who did not return. And you can see those on the backside of the poncho there in the center of the screen. Their chimes hang among the rod clusters, allowing them to speak to us. If you look behind it, you'll see that the rifle is broken, showing that the war is over. And it is held in a position which will signal a medevac to land, indicating that help is still needed. The rifle stands on a replica of a Native American burial mound and includes a flash of orange glass to remind us of the effects of Agent Orange and war on ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. So if you look at this specific tribute, you'll see that not a single one of these statues are complete. They're missing something. But yet they need each other to support it to stand. And I don't think that's any different than the veterans in our community today in dealing with post-war trauma or the transition of service or anything else. There's a brotherhood and a sisterhood that is bound in service that makes that so much easier when you're around other veterans.
The Dove effigy mound was the second tribute placed at the Highground, and it was part of the original plan from the founding members to have a tribute that honored and remembered prisoners of war and missing in action. So this is a living memorial. It's in a replica of an ancient Native American effigy mound. It was designed by Vietnam veteran artist David Giffey, who's from Spring Green, Wisconsin. And when David was trying to decide how to design a tribute for the POWs and MIAs, he was struggling with it. And he said that on his first visit to the Highground site, he had a mourning dove fly past him, and he was inspired by this. And his words from his artist statement for the tribute, he said, "Birds in general, and doves in particular, have symbolized hopefulness and peace throughout the history of human life. They are the antithesis of war in a symbolic sense. An effigy mound is a simple and graceful tribute to nature. On my first visit to the Highground, a small gray mourning dove flew past me as I arrived at the park. It was my inspiration. Among the sad memories that I hold of Vietnam is one which tells of naturally lush countryside that was burned, defoliated, and cratered by explosions. The construction of a mourning dove mound might help in a symbolic way to fill some of these craters." When we bring tours and students, and Chris will talk about some of the adult tours, they are able to actually go onto this tribute and get a sense of release from the troubles that they've come to the park with. The effigy mound was created with soil from all 72 counties of Wisconsin, as well as hundreds of locations around the United States, 18 different countries, including soil from both North and South Vietnam, sand from Iwo Jima, and also sand from the beach in Normandy, in Utah Beach. The dove measures 100 foot from head to tail, and looking at this, the head is on the left and the tail is on the right. And the wingspan is 140 feet across, and the center measures 6.5 feet high. To give a little information on the number of United States missing in action that are currently not recovered, from the Vietnam War, there are still 1,764 men that have not been recovered. From the Korean War, over 6,800. World War II, over 20,000 men. And World War I, over 14,000. And I think you wanted to talk about the,
Briefly.
Stone.
On the plaza, there's actually a stone with engraving on it that you can't read on this, so I'm gonna read it out to you and then talk a little bit more. But this effigy mound is a spiritual place where you can go and let your mother, the earth, hold you. Let the children play on it, dance on it. Use it to unload your grief and pain, to renew and strengthen you. Lay back in the soft folds of its wings and let Mother Earth unburden you. Then get up and leave your troubles and cares there on the mound as you walk away renewed and refreshed. So we have several tours throughout the year. Some of those happen to be from the Toma VA that have veterans that are in their inpatient mental health care. And 3-4 times a year, they come up and they get a tour. One of the things that I ask just about anybody that comes to the tour is to go down and leave those burdens on that mound and walk away. Because we can't go back in time and change those horrific things that we've had to see, do. We can't go back and change that. All we can do is possibly find a purpose in the trauma and go somewhere with that. And it was kind of neat to actually watch some veterans actually went down and laid on it. After they were released from their care at Toma VA, I've seen, there was a group of 3 women. I've seen those 3 women come back every year. And they bypass everything. They walk right down the hill. They go down there. I don't spy, but you kind of pay attention to what's going on. And they go down there, and there is a healing acumen to this mound. To kind of caveat on that a little bit, which means to add more, I had the pleasure of listening to a retired Army Major General Bob Dees speak about resilience. And there was a couple takeaways that I like to share with a lot of people. One of them, he talked about a tennis ball and an egg. So when you're faced with adversity, do you fall to the ground and break like an egg, never get put back together and live in that moment for the rest of your life? Or are you a tennis ball who bounces back, looks at that as a challenge or a change in your life and move forward? I would have loved to have had that information in my brain housing group when my kids were growing up. The other thing he talked about was that revolved around resilience. A lot of Vietnam veterans, just I think basically for a couple reasons. One, a large majority of them were drafted, so they were forced into something they didn't necessarily want to do, or how they were treated when they came back, left a really bad taste in their mouth. And even 50 years later, I can still feel and hear that tension in their voice when they talk about it. So what the general did is he had cut this lime up into several pieces, and he asked one of the guests, just so happened to be a Marine that was dumb enough to do it, took a bite out of the lemon, rind and all. And the general looked at me and goes, "Would you like that taste in your mouth all day?" What do you think his answer was? No. How about all year? 10 years, 50 years. So why are you still focusing on something that you have no control of?
Excuse me, what did you say about the orange before? With that in the war?
Oh, the Agent Orange was a chemical that was sprayed on the foliage to kill it, so you would be able to see farther.
Really?
And it also had a lot of cancer. Many of the Vietnam veterans have already passed from effects of that, many different levels of cancer.
Because not to undermine what you said, what you explained to me about, between your analogy of the egg and the tennis ball, where I have another analogy of that orange. You know the ladybug?
Yep.
This is one thing I don't understand, okay? And this week, I've got a lot of ladybug on my former residence, all right? And with the with the forces of nature, with the forces of nature and all that, I thought, wow. Uh, I even said, oh, I am sorry to the ladybug, but because all these forces of nature, the wind and all that, they do pollinate somewhat for us to have food. All right. And whatever, and they all carry it. Am I correct in saying so? But anyway, and so one day, when I was, that orange, when I, dang, it is orange. With this bug. They're all orange on my hand. Oh my goodness.
Thanks,
What's
thanks,
even eating me?
thanks for sharing.
I have a brother who served in Vietnam, and he was gonna try and come tonight, but it would be too hard for him. And he actually, goes to either Toma or, I think there's a place up on Highway 29 too. for them.
Up in Colby. I think it's Colby.
One of those.
Thorpe.
Thorpe. And he gets sprayed because
With skin cancer. Yeah.
and they spray him so that he doesn't, so far he doesn't have skin cancer. But
Oh, prevented it.
This is a preventative measure for, he was in the age, or it's a preventative measure for cancer.
Dang, I didn't know that they did that.
That's really
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
So, moving on, after the effigy mound was constructed, the following year, in their original plan, was to put in a gold star to honor the families that lost a son or daughter in combat. So on the left-hand side of the screen there, you'll see what the original design was. They planted gold top shrubs in the shape of a star. Unfortunately, those trees kept dying, or those shrubs kept dying because we had a bacteria in the ground that we didn't know of. So they were continually pulling trees and replacing them. So in 2016, they redid the design where they put brickwork in the shape of a star and they filled it with a gold resin-coated sand. It looked beautiful. The photos we have is beautiful. There's an LED light bar that goes around. So at night when, I'm sure the space station can look down and wonder what that star is. We've actually had pilots that have flown over, saw it, drove to see what it was. The landing strip, right. The problem with that is you can see that it's on an incline. So every time it rained, the sand washed out. People's tax deductions thought it was a sandbox, and the animals would walk through it, and some would think it was a litter box. So there was a lot of innocent desecration that was done to this tribute, especially for the meaning that is behind it. So in 2020 and 2021 and 22, the staff and a few volunteers would mix that sand with a glue, and it's actually rock hard. I'm not saying to walk on it, but you can walk on it. We're not going to have the erosion. Unfortunately, a deer did walk by it about 3 weeks ago and got its hoof caught underneath the light bar and snapped it. So I don't even know what that's going to cost to fix because I got to replace the whole light bar. But if you look in the center here, you'll see a pentagon of green grass. This is also a pentagon over here. When they were building this tribute, there was a Gold Star mother that was up on top of the plaza and waved one of the volunteers up because she had something that she wanted to put in the tribute. And in her hand was a bucket, and in that bucket was dirt. It was dirt from her garden. It was the last place she saw her son before he went to Vietnam and he didn't come home. So that bucket of dirt was placed in the center of the original star. When we redesigned it, we kept that area there because we always want to make sure that we honor that gift and that story for that family. Missing anything yet, Teresa? So in 1992, the organization restructured to not just be a tribute for Vietnam veterans. We wanted to honor all service from World War I through current and future conflicts. So in 1992, we dedicated 2 tributes. I'll talk about the first one on the left. That's a World War I doughboy. Does anybody know why they're called a doughboy? I've been waiting to find the right answer.
It's got something to do with the helmet, doesn't it?
Maybe. So I Googled it because that's what you do.
We're in the library.
Yeah, we are in a library. Some of the things that I came up with didn't make a whole lot of sense. Like one, it was so hot you could bake bread. Well, I'm not Marcus Stewart, but I'm pretty sure bread takes about 350 degrees, and it wasn't that hot. Another thing that I read from a view top, from a ways when they saw them in uniform, they looked like French bakers. The one that kind of makes a little bit more sense to me, from my time in the service, when you get sent to another country, you always don't have the personal protective equipment or the armament to be able to fulfill your mission right from the get-go, or you might have to do some acclimatization or training, and they got put on mess duty. And if you've ever been on mess duty, the person that makes bread is the first one up.
The statue on the right is called the Nurse. When you arrive at the park, probably the first thing that you're going to go up to is the Nurse. She is only 33 inches high, but she stands directly in front of our main flagpole, the 70-foot flagpole. And the story behind her is that there was a competition in Washington, D.C. to have a life-size statue that honored Vietnam veteran women that served in the Vietnam War, and particularly nurses. For this one, Roger Broden was a sculptor that submitted this nurse into that competition, but she wasn't chosen. The one that they chose, if you look it up, is beautiful. It's got several different figures in it. And one of the things we heard is maybe they wanted to then generalize it more, not just specifically to a nurse. But had she been chosen, our nurse would have been in DC instead of the Highground, and she would have been life-size. When they found out that a different design was chosen for DC, the Wisconsin chapters of the Vietnam Veterans of America purchased the statue for the Highground, where she pays tribute for us, for all women that have served at any time. You see in this picture, there are a lot of items that are like in the helmet that she's got in front of her. When you visit the Highground, you'll see our statues are all bronze, and they have lots of items on them: flowers, coins, photographs, dog tags, and these were not items that were originally planned to be as part of the statue, but it's items that our visitors bring and leave in loving memory of somebody, or to honor somebody, or like Chris was saying with the dove, to unburden themselves of memories or things that are troubling them from their service. And we don't remove those items unless they're harming the statues, or if they're just becoming too much and we think something's going to get wrecked. And when we do have to remove them, we don't throw them away. We archive those into the museum, and we do put those on exhibit as well.
I want to talk briefly about that too with the coins. This is just for informational purposes. Does anybody know why coins are left at a memorial or a gravesite?
Well, at this time, if you're going to talk about coins, there's so many different coins of each country.
Well, I'm gonna talk about U.S. denomination coins. It actually started during the Roman times, because a lot of the soldiers didn't want to actually go and pay their respects to the family. And it didn't become prevalent in the United States until the Vietnam War. Just because how they were treated, they didn't want to be seen for fear of any retribution. So a lot of veterans will leave coins here at the tributes. A penny is signifying that they went to boot camp together. A nickel is they trained together. A dime is they deployed together, and a quarter is they were with them when they died. So there's some meaning behind those coins. And I only bring this up because somebody decided that they wanted to clean out all of those coins and probably use it for something. So during our education days, which we'll talk about, that's one of the things we bring up, that it's not somebody just left change behind as a donation. They left coins as a form of communication. So when you walk up to a tribute, you see a bunch of quarters there. There's some symbolic to that. 1993, we dedicated the World War II globe. There's a family here that was inspirational in that. The globe itself, it can only be a World War II veteran that submitted their design and what they wanted. 5 designs were actually submitted and 2 were chosen. One is the globe and the other is the base that it sits on. And it's really hard to see in this picture, but here, these are stained glass windows that are the same colors as the campaign ribbons that would have been awarded to those veterans that served during those times. On this side, countries that we served in during the European theater. On the back side is Pacific theater, and actually the opposite side. And on the far back side is an inscription on Kilroy. Everybody know the story behind Kilroy? It was just a real simple design that was etched on boxes and trees, and it just let the advancing soldiers know if they saw that there was friendlies in front of them. So when I was in Iraq, we didn't have Kilroy. For whatever reason, we had Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris was written on everything. And then Chuck Norris showed up wearing a fanny pack on a USO tour, and the Marines kind of backed off a little bit. But I'd encourage you to come to the park and see that and read a little bit more history behind Kilroy.
So the WASP statue stands for Women Air Force Service Pilots, and it's one of 4 women that are statues of the Highground. Very proud about that. At the start of World War II, there were thousands of female pilots that were just pilots on their own as civilians for their own hobby and enjoyment. When the war broke out, these women banded together in groups and they tried to get the government to allow them to do something as pilots to support the war effort. For the first couple of years, the government kept turning them down because they didn't think women would be capable of doing the jobs that were necessary as pilots in the military fashion. But around 1943, there was a shortage of men that could fly combat missions. So they wanted to free up the men from all the non-combat duties to fly those combat missions, and then they did take the women up as far as using their pilot experience for the military. But of the thousands that applied to be WASPs, only 1,700 were selected to do the training, and of those, only 1,100 went through successfully from the grueling training. So there were 1,100 women that served as WASP, and what they did was they did all non-combat missions. They learned how to fly all of the American military planes, including test pilots of rocket and jet-propelled airplanes, new airplanes. They served by ferrying planes back and forth, testing aircraft, actually towing targets for live anti-aircraft firing practice, and also trained men to fly. Of these 1,100, 38 of the women were killed while serving overseas, and because they were not considered full military members, they had to basically pass the hat to bring the women's bodies back to their families for burial. One of these WASPs who died was from Wisconsin. Her name is Margaret June Peggy Sipe. So the women served as WASP from August 1943 to December 1944. In December 1944, the government then said to them that they were taking jobs away from the men. They needed to go back home and let the men, resume those jobs. In 1977, the WASP finally received veteran status for their service. One sort of exciting thing that happened at the Highground was that the Travel Channel visited the Highground a few years back and videotaped our WASP statue as part of a documentary program they were doing, and their program titled Monumental Mysteries. So we were sworn to secrecy before they got there. It was sort of fun, but then it was aired, and you can find it online now too. Dorothy Swain Lewis was one of the final remaining members of the 99s, as they were called, of the WASP. She happened to come to the Highground one day. She was also a sculptress and an artist. So she was impressed with the Highground. She wanted one of her statues that she designed to be placed at the Highground, and I think you said there were 4 in the country. So we have one of them, very proud to have it. On the base of the statue, when you're at the Highground, I encourage you to go there and read it yourself, but it says, "We live in the wind and the sand, and our eyes are on the stars." So we're very,
This is the statue.
that is it, yeah.
That she designed.
Yeah.
And that's
And then she
just
was there for
down
the
the,
dedication too.
this globe is right here, so it's not very far. So when you see the one, right behind it is the other.
How new is that? How long has it been there?
2006,
2006.
yeah. Well, I guess it says it right there, huh? So there's one in Washington DC, there's one in Colorado on the Air Force Base, and I don't know exactly where in Texas, but the other one is in Texas. How many people have been to the wall in DC?
Where?
In Washington DC, it's Vietnam Wall. While you were there, you noticed there was 3 statues. One is depicting an African American, one a Hispanic, and one a Caucasian. Did you know that per capita, more Native Americans served in Vietnam than any other ethnic group, and they weren't recognized in that tribute? Over 42,000 Native Americans served during the Vietnam War. So at the Highground, we had the only National Native American Vietnam Memorial. We dedicated this in 1995. We don't own this, it just sits on the land. We maintain it. Any changes would have to be done by the Native American Council. But if you look behind you, you'll see that there's 2 flags. One is the American flag, and the other is a tribal flag. Over 86 different tribes fought in Vietnam, and we have a flag of each one of those tribes. We rotate them throughout the years to make sure that we show our respect and honor to those that served during Vietnam. The statue itself, the bronze statue, is a Native American brave holding a rifle in one hand and a battle staff in the other. If you look at that battle staff, you'll see that there's eagle feathers on it. Those eagle feathers are to signify a combatant that this brave killed in combat, not to be viewed as a war trophy. In the Native American culture, they're responsible for bringing their spirit on the rest of the journey. It sits on a 10-ton piece of red granite to signify the blood that was shed, and the white rocks, the quartz rocks that are around it, are to signify the honor for those that serve. Now, in this area right here, all the way around the tribute, are the names of Native Americans that were killed in Vietnam. Maybe not just from Vietnam, but from an illness, to include mental illness after they came home if they took their own life. They're still honored on this tribute. It's broken down into name, rank, home of record, date of casualty, reason of casualty, and branch of service from all over the United States, not just Wisconsin. In 1996, I know this timeline is a little bit off, but they used to work out of a job trailer. The information center was just a trailer. At one point, it got so windy up there, it blew it over. So they figured they'd build something a little bit more strong and sturdy. So this specific building was manufactured off-site and not assembled off-site, just manufactured and assembled on the Highground property by volunteers, majority volunteers. I think the only things that wasn't a volunteer was the roof. Floor, electric, everything was done by volunteers. It's made up of 51 tons of Wisconsin white oak, and they told me that they only had to drill one hole because it's held together by dowels, and there was only one hole that had to be drilled. All the rest of them were perfect. They just had to re-drill, or maybe one was forgotten at the manufacturer. Right across the road from that is a working Liberty Bell. There are 37 of these in the United States, and this is the only one that has a rope tied to the clapper. This is the only place that you can come and ring the Liberty Bell. Many of them are inside Capitol buildings, rotundas. There's a couple of them that are just sitting out in the field, kind of rotting away. But we encourage our guests to come and ring this because, one, it's the only one, but ring it in honor or memory of someone that's near and dear to you. This specific bell was owned by 4 businessmen out of Minnesota that traveled around to 37 different states teaching the history of the Liberty Bell, freedoms, and freedoms that we endure as Americans to elementary school kids. You can imagine how many booger hooks have actually touched this bell.
Oh, sure. You
Got to follow that, yes.
There are, with our 155 acres of the high ground, we have 4.5 miles of trails through a wooded area, and we keep it very primitive. It's not highly groomed or not paved, so it's very natural, very serene, and it's there. I was on them today, actually. Took a break today and walked through them. But they're open to the public 24 hours a day, every day of the year. We have a lot of visitors that come in the winter for snowshoeing, even though we don't groom the trails in the winter. They're available. We find that they've been very helpful during our veteran programs for PTSD management activities. And we are putting in shortly here a series of 30 signs that are for forest therapy, PTSD therapy, and educational signs.
Once the snow melts and the ground thaws.
The signs were funded by the Clark County Health Department and through a donation from Combat Parts up in Abbotsford. Wisconsin Conservation Corps actually created the 2 picnic shelters and these trails long ago. And like everything at the high ground, our volunteers come through there 2 weeks a year to take care of trimming back the trails. We always have windstorms come through, ice storms, big time last year. So it takes a lot of volunteer work to keep them looking nice and accessible. Yeah.
In 2006, we put in a meditation garden. It's broken up into 4 different chambers. The first chamber has a 4-foot prayer stone in it that has etched on it, kneel, heal, and pray. There's another area that's what I would consider a quintessential meditation garden where it's in a circle. There used to be a bunch of shrubs that were growing up around there. The deer found that they needed it more than we did. So we have since replanted dogwood shrub that's winter tolerant, deer resistant, winter tolerant, whichever how that works out. So hopefully another 3-4 years that'll grow up enough that'll give you privacy inside of that.
For the Ascension of Doves, that's the sculpture on the left. When the meditation garden was created, there was a shelter house that's just to the left of the sculpture. There wasn't anything there at that time in the middle. They decided that there was a signature sculpture that was needed for that area. So they put out a contest, a design contest. 5 designs were submitted. This design, called Ascension of Doves, was submitted by UW Eau Claire art student Ann Jensen, who lived in Black River Falls. She just passed away last year, sadly. The welder, David Hallingstad, created the sculpture. And there's a story that always gets me, because as you work at the Highground, as you're part of the Highground, you meet more and more people, more and more families, more and more veterans. So a lot of these items that we're talking about today become even more and more special. So the opposite of what you might think, where you get hard into things, actually become more emotional the more you're at the Highground. So this one gets me, because I know the family. But in 2004, Joel and Janie Brockman visited the Highground, and they visited, and their son Andrew Wallace was going to be deploying with the National Guard shortly. And they thought this would be a wonderful place to bring Andrew when he returned home, and then to become part of the Highground volunteer family. Tragically, on September 26th of the next year, 2005, Sergeant Andrew Wallace was killed while serving in Iraq. The next month, his parents returned to the Highground and visited them with the then manager, Kirk Rodman, to talk about how they could, what ways that would be available to honor their son at the Highground. This was happening right then, so Kirk told them about one of the options could be to sponsor the Ascension of Dove sculpture. Janie, excuse me. So the original sculptural design was for 6 doves. And just 10 days before the sculpture was to be placed on its base, David the welder called the Highground because he felt the change would be needed, because he felt there was a hole in that sculpture, and he asked if they could add a 7th dove. So Kirk knew he had to contact the family before any changes were made. He made a phone call to Janie, and Janie broke down in tears. And Kirk felt horrible. He thought, on top of the tragedy, now he's asking about this, and upsetting Janie. And Janie told him to no. She actually told him to shut up, Kirk, because don't you remember that 7 doves were released at Andrew's funeral? So the fact that there were now going to be 7 doves on this tribute that they've sponsored in his memory was perfect. On February 24th, 2006, Andrew's family, Ann Jensen and David Hallingstead, set the sculpture's base in the meditation garden.
Another-
Now you got us.
And she's practiced this many times.
This is the best I've made it through it.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
This tribute right here is called this is in the meditation garden also. This is called the Fountain of Tears. If you look towards the top, you'll see there's a soldier with a hand on a battlefield cross signifying the loss of a brother. And in his clenched hand up by his chest is a set of identification tags or dog tags of the deceased. Water comes down the teardrop waterfalls underneath the bridge and collects into a little pond here, the reflection pond. And on the edge of that sits the mother and daughter of the fallen. And the sculptor's name is Michael Martino from La Crosse, Wisconsin. Did a phenomenal job of capturing sorrow in his face. If and when you do come, if you're able to stand in front of it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. During the summer months when we have water running through it, the level is where the daughter's toes are touching the water, making the connection between her and her mother and her father. This is probably the most impactful and powerful one for me personally on the park. Everybody's got their own. Being a combat veteran, I also have some issues with post-war trauma. At times, my anxiety level is a little bit higher than normal. Stress levels amped up a little bit more because running the park may not be as lavish as people think. And there's times that I walk down and I stand there in front of this family, and it kind of helps me realize that my problems really aren't that big anymore. Because nothing can be as painful as the loss of a family member to conflict. And it kind of gives me the courage and the strength to move on from my big boy panties on and go get done what was troubling me. The Korean tribute is up on the parking lot. If you were to look straight down on it, you'd see that it's shaped like the yin and the yang, same as the Korean flag. Half this water, half this grass. The peninsula that sticks out in the water has got 3 statues on it. One is to signify heat. The other is to signify pain and suffering. That's the standing one in the middle with two soldiers. And then, of course, the one that's actually facing to the north is the extreme cold. Anybody know how cold it got in Korea during the frozen children?
Yeah, I do.
I read -30, -40.
Yeah, well,
How well did you operate in those temperatures being from Wisconsin?
I was there in, 83 and 84. And, I mean, yeah, 53 and 54.
I was gonna say 83.
Yeah, 53 and 54. But, no, it wasn't, I mean, we had like 30 below.
But you didn't operate very well in 30 below, did you?
Well, I was fortunate because I was the mail clerk for our company.
Thanks for your honesty. Which is a very important job, by the way.
Yes. it
Mail is extremely detrimental.
is. That's right.
I think I covered everything I wanted to in that. Oh, there's 2 Medal of Honor recipients that are honored in this tribute by their families. One is Einer Ingman from Rhinelander, and the other is Mitchell Red Cloud. Now, I apologize, I forgot to print off his Medal of Honor citation, but I'm gonna kind of commit a little bit to memory here. Because we placed this stone 3 years ago, and his granddaughter was in the crowd, and this is where the sad part comes from. So Mitchell Red Cloud served in World War II as a Marine and was injured in the Battle of Okinawa. Was sent back to the States for recovery and subsequently was discharged from the Marine Corps. A year later, he was recovered, still wanted to continue serving his country. He joined the Army and found himself in Korea. His medal of citation read something similar to, while standing at an observation post, he sounded the alarm as the enemy was attacking the base where everybody was sleeping except for Mitchell and another watch on the other side of the camp. Single-handedly, he started engaging them with small arms fire while everybody else got into their fighting positions and continued engaging the enemy. At one point, he had been shot 6 times, so weak that he tied himself to a tree to continue fighting. And they found him the following morning, still tied to the tree, succumbed to a 7th gunshot wound. His daughter or granddaughter, who sat in the crowd, had absolutely no idea the heroism of her father. That's the sad part. There's so many times that we hear about that at the Highground where we're honoring somebody, either posthumously, most of the time posthumously, where their family can't even tell me the 3 simple questions that I ask them. At least to me, they're simple. Branch of service, what was their job, and year served. I can't tell you the amount of times I hear I don't know. That's history that is now gone because veterans don't typically share their stories. Persian Gulf, this was dedicated in 2016. If you were doing a bird's eye view, you'd see that it's shaped like a boot print in the sand. The Jersey barriers that are there are synonymous to the same barriers that we used in Iraq and Afghanistan around the camps and along the roads to prevent vehicle-borne IEDs from entering in our positions. Now, mind you, these are a lot smaller than the ones that we used. I believe that we call those Texas barriers that we used in Iraq and Afghanistan. Inside of there are 4 different statues and a sign. The first one is a battlefield cross, which is a pair of combat boots, inverted rifle, helmet on top of the rifle, and identification tags. Ours actually also has a folded American flag associated to it. Behind it, you'll see a map of the Middle East, and behind that is a timeline of the conflicts. Now, this tribute is for those who served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm in 89 and 90 through Iraq and Afghanistan. That sign is not necessarily up to date because we haven't put in there the withdrawal and end of the Afghanistan conflict. The next tribute is this one here. And this is a female service member saying hello or goodbye to her family. It's up to the person that looks at it. One day I'll walk down and look at it, and it looks like they're saying goodbye. Another day I'll go down and it looks like Maybe she's coming home, but he's sad because he didn't get the honeydew list done by the time she got back. The next tribute is a depiction of a combat soldier out on patrol. Those that served in Vietnam did not have the personal protective equipment that we have in today's conflicts. Best guess, you're looking at an additional 60 to 75 pounds of equipment that we're carrying that they did in Vietnam.
They weren't recognized when they came home either.
That is true, and I'll talk about that later on. And if I don't, remind me. The last tribute, and it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but this is a thinker. This could be actually a picture of, or a statue of a individual contemplating joining service. It can be a veteran that is looking back at his service, whatever it may be, whatever how you want to look at it. We just call it the thinker. Now, during education days, I view this as this is after service. Because after service, anybody that has spent some time overseas is bound to have some sort of, not just even overseas, just military service in general, is bound to have some sort of post-war trauma or post-traumatic stress. I don't like putting the D in it because it's not a disorder. In that, we have symptoms such as hypervigilance, anger, anxiety, feeling of loneliness, helplessness. During education week, how do you talk about conflict to somebody that's 5 year or a fifth grader? How do you try to correlate that without causing some nightmares for those? But think about this. If anybody here, don't answer this, ever been bullied? Do you think the same symptoms? So we try to match those two up. To utilize that as a form of education. So one, I understand what a veteran is going through, but two, to be able to start treating those around them with maybe a little bit more respect or whatever how they want to be treated. I do want to point out that on the way it currently sits right now, there are two armbands on there. One is, his name is Matthew Spangelberg, served in the Army. And on the other wrist is Nathan Walker, served with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines as a sniper. Both of those two individuals took their own life after service. Nathan was in 2022, leaving behind a 22-year-old wife, a 2-year-old son, and a 1-year-old daughter. His demons got to him. And I think one of the problems was he went from a high-stress job as a Marine or a serviceman right into being a police officer, one with no transition or seeking any assistance. I'm only guessing that was part of the issue.
And to add on to that, those weren't part of the original statute. These
No.
are among the items that were placed on the tribute by family members.
Family members, and actually
people that
Nathan
served
was
with
friends.
them. And the Persian Gulf tribute is probably where we see the most items left at the tribute at the different, like the battlefield cross. We always have things that are left on the
Coins,
battlefield cross
pictures.
and on the soldier. You know.
We always have a wonderful Memorial Day service at our cemetery in town. And so often, they shoot the guns or what I don't know the correct terminology. You'll see veterans, veterans walk away.
Mhm.
They'll just walk away.
We started announcing it at the park, letting them know that at this point in the ceremony, we will actually be doing a rifle salute. So they're prepared for it, and it also gives them time if they did want to walk away. That actually stemmed because we had two guests that were in the Sandy Hook shooting as students. And the father had come up and mentioned that to me, and that was just kind of the trigger device there. It is getting close to 7:30. We're on an hour. Again, I'm not holding you here, but we're going to keep going as long as somebody wants to listen.
What's the name of this dog?
This one here, Satan.
That is the real name.
That is the real name, and I'll get into that. So in 2018, we dedicated the Military Working Dog Tribute, and it's right behind the Liberty Bell. So the U.S. Armed Forces have been using military working dogs in service since at least World War I. They're used as scout dogs, patrol dogs, or guard dogs. In the past, most of those dogs were trained, handed off to a handler, and went and did the combat missions or wherever they were designed to do. And then after the conflict, where do you think the dog stayed?
With its master.
Nope, dog stayed in that country.
Okay.
The service member came back. How many people have pets? Can you imagine leaving that behind? Especially after it saved probably your life more than once or twice. That was your confidant, that was your best friend. You relied on one another for survival, and you had to leave it behind. There's been more tears shed since I've been at the Highground, that's only since 2020, at this tribute than any other. That bond that is built. Now in Iraq and Afghanistan, those dogs started coming back with their handlers. And there's even nonprofits out there that are paying for the vet bills after service. So a dog typically only is going to serve until they're about 6 years old or prior to injury. But if you think we have post-traumatic stress, you imagine that dog. Luckily, a lot of those dogs into retirement are adopted by either a previous handler or another military dog, dog handler, where they become a service dog. In 1988, when Fragments was dedicated, a guest came by with their dog, and it happened to mark Fragments. And it just happened to do it in front of a couple Vietnam veterans. So you could assume that that was probably not a very good time for the dog owner or the management of the Highground at that time. So from 1988 till 2021, there was no dogs allowed on the property. And I remember standing out in front of this tribute one day thinking, why do we still have dogs who are not allowed on the property? How many veterans today have service dogs? How many veterans do you think come to the Highground and might be triggered, but their dog is sitting in the vehicle because we don't allow them on the property? So all those signs came down. Oh, and we have a tribute for dogs. All those signs came down. We put in a little doggy walking potty area with the nice little bags. And please don't do like the commercial where the guy's like, oh, look, free bags. Well, we asked to walk your dog there before you go through the rest of the park. And then we asked to keep him on a 6-foot leash. Keep the dog on a 6-foot leash so you can control when and where they utilize their facilities. And then please clean up after them.
That could be where this what they call dog tag for military came about too, in some sense.
That's a whole different program.
Yeah.
So in 2021, we dedicated the Lost 74 tribute. So in 1969, June 3rd, the USS Evans, which is a U.S. battleship, was trading off the coast of Australia with the HMAS Melbourne, which is an aircraft carrier. And they were training together before they went to Vietnam. They were doing night maneuvers, and the U.S. Evans turned port instead of starboard, which left, right. And the Melbourne ran into the destroyer, U.S. destroyer, cut it in half, and 74 sailors lost their life. You will not see those names on the wall in Washington, D.C. because they weren't in Vietnam. So the survivors of this horrific crash formed a committee, and they purchased a stone for every state that lost a sailor in that accident. And the Highground is very fortunate enough to be the place where this stone is at. Every one of these stones are identical throughout the United States. There's 3 left to be placed. The last time I talked to them, Georgia, Virginia, and Pennsylvania are stones that still need to be placed. But they're identical to this except for on the back, and I'm going to read this off. Some gave all 3 June 1969 a collision of the USS Frankie Evans and the HMS Melbourne during the Vietnam War. Sailors from Wisconsin are Yosin's mate, James Richard Camilla, Seaman Apprentice Michael Anthony Orlowski, Radio Operator 3rd Class John Wayne Thomas. And if I said those ranks wrong, I apologize. Least we forget. During the dedication of this, it was right after COVID. We did it on Memorial Day. We had 300 and some motorcycles during one of our events. We were asked to not do it because of COVID. We did it anyway because you're going to tell somebody on a motorcycle that they can't do something, and you're not going to tell a veteran they're not going to do something either. So we were very fortunate enough to have a couple of the family members and 5 of the remaining survivors of this crash there at the dedication.
Veteran retreats is something that I have worked with since we started the program in 2017, we had noticed, I guess, really obviously at the Highground, when veterans got together on the Highground for different ceremonies or just visiting, that there was a key amount of healing from post-traumatic stress or just the sharing of stories. They were able to talk with other veterans about their service, where their families, like Chris said before, never heard a word of it. So we realized that just getting veterans together would result in so much healing that we wanted to do something to promote that. So in 2017, we began our Veterans Retreat program with our first male veterans retreat. Our retreats are 3 to 4 days long. We have 5 retreats that we do every year now. We have a male retreat, 2 female veteran retreats, a winter retreat, and a couples retreat for a veteran and spouse or significant other. What we do is they do different workshops that have been shown to be very helpful for PTSD management. Also for the female retreats, we do focus a lot on military sexual trauma recovery. So we do a lot of workshops, whether it's like equine therapy where we go off-site, there's the archery, guest speakers, different activities and hobbies that they can learn. And the best part, again, is they are doing this together. So it's a lot of laughter, it is a lot of tears, it's a lot of sharing things. We have veterans that said they've never talked about this in 40 years. We have female veterans that say, this is the first time I have slept without nightmares in 10 years. So it's just that the Highground is a magical place in one way because there's just something you cannot describe, but it is a safe place. You feel like this is a place of comfort and trust and safety. So when we are able to do our retreats at the Highground, just that atmosphere helps everybody feel at ease and also promotes the healing, which we have in the conversations, our counseling workshops. Then we get together for talking circles, we get together around bonfires. 3 years ago, we started the winter retreats because I think for everybody, winter is a hard time. We tend to isolate ourselves, we tend to stay indoors, we tend to not do a lot. So we wanted to do something to show veterans different activities that they could do outdoors and also incorporate our mindfulness workshops, journaling, just discussing, whatever anyone has to be able to discuss for their PTSD recovery or management.
Snow, Mother Nature did not work with us for snowshoeing this year, but we did get 17 veterans out on the ice fishing.
Yep. As I said, we have 2 female veterans retreats, and that might sound unfair because we don't have 2 for the male veterans. It's also a matter of staffing and time of the year. But when we started the male veterans retreat, we had female veterans right away going, where's our retreat? We need a retreat. We waited until 2019 because we knew that we were going to have to learn what we could about military sexual trauma because we thought there may be female veterans that come that are seeking help in managing that recovery from their military sexual trauma. What we did expect, and we were so happy that we prepared with professional counseling advice, was that majority of the female veterans that did attend were recovering from military sexual trauma, as well as post-traumatic stress and trauma from the military service. Even though they're very proud to be military veterans, they have no regrets about serving, but it's their experiences that they're now dealing with their recovery. So we have, this year, we have a Highground-based female veterans retreat. These are open to any female veterans of any era, and the male veteran retreats are male veterans of any era. And we'll stay at the Highground, do activities at the Highground, maybe a few off-site, but locally. And we also have a Ice Age trail hike for female veterans that we take them up by Holcomb. And with that, there's just a great deal of confidence building, and hiking and camping is something that is usually you can spend as much as you want, but it's generally if you want to go hiking and camping, no matter what economic status you're at, you can find a way to do that. So we give them the skills, the instruction on how to go hiking and camping on their own if they wanted to, as well as we have funding from grants from WDVA and individual donors that allow us to send veterans home from all the retreats with items that coordinate with the workshops, with the skills they learn. So they're not left cold at the end of the retreat. They go home with stuff that which they can continue to enjoy these hobbies that they've learned during the retreat. And we also encourage them to stay in contact with us. Vets and Guitars. I recognize a couple of Vets and Guitar alumni over there. We have a program that started a couple of years ago called Vets and Guitars, and now we also have Vets and Ukuleles, where Victoria Shoemaker, she's got the green guitar, she's a musician instructor. She comes and she holds 3 courses a year, spring, summer, fall, which go for 10 sessions each one. And because of the funding that we get, the veteran is able to just show up, and we supply the instrument and whatever they need to learn how to play that instrument. And if it's something that they enjoy, that brings joy into their life, is a good hobby for them, and they're able to keep the instrument free of charge through our funding. Art, music, writing, anything creative helps to just be
Your attention, please.
joyful.
The library will be closing in 20 minutes.
We better
All
hurry.
of today's meeting room reservations are now expiring. If
That's
you're
so
using
cute.
one of our meeting rooms, please gather your things and exit the room. If you have materials you would like to borrow, please check them out
I'll
now.
just say that the
The
workshops,
library
like
will be
with the art
closing
days,
in
help
20
you to
minutes.
focus
Thank you.
and just the stuff that you're dealing with, maybe some mental scattered or just having a bad day. Once you focus on something with drawing or art or music, that sort of recedes and you're able to maybe get yourself out of that.
I'm gonna fly through these last ones because they're gonna be closing the doors on us, and I don't wanna spend the night. In 2023, we added some additional groups, not like we didn't have enough things to do during the year, but we added a veteran and family support group. Half of the staff and a handful of our volunteers are facilitator trained by the Northern American Alliance of Mental Illness as facilitators in group sessions. Was it last year? Yeah, it was last year. We partnered up with the Toma VA suicide prevention specialist, where she provided a lot of historical data for us. And upon request, Teresa, myself, and a couple of the other volunteers will travel around the state and do an hour to an hour 45-minute presentation on suicide prevention. We talk about lethal means. We talk about past statistics, current statistics, and proper communication. And to be able to hopefully have the courage when you leave there, that if there's somebody in your life that doesn't have to be a veteran, that is not acting right, to have the courage to be able to ask, are you thinking of killing yourself? And then know what the steps are based on their response. This could be for anybody. It doesn't have to be veteran-based. We only say that it's veteran-based based off of the funding that we received from a generous donor to help us do this program. But it would benefit anybody, I think.
Well, to reconnect with that music, I'm sorry, to reconnect with the therapy, that really helps a lot with because over the years, if you're going to see the transition of the Philippine flag, I came from the Philippines.
I got just a few more, I got a few more
You
minutes.
see
Can I
that
finish
there's
this
a
up?
pounder, like it shapes like a bell, a man.
We're gonna let him finish, okay?
Thank you. We also have a spouse and partners veteran support group. A lot of times it's always about the veteran, but what about the person that's there helping us? What about the spouse? They need to have their time also, their person to talk to. So we have you can either be there in person or we have it virtually also where you can Zoom in. I think we do Teams now. And then in 2023, we also realized that in the process, many veterans are either married during service and their spouse is still with them, or they get married after service. So there's a communication disconnect. So a lot of, even during service and after service, there's a lot of divorces because of service, and we want to prevent that. So this year we started our Operation Reconnect, which is a couples retreat. Don't match that up with the movie that's out there. This is basically designed to reconnect with your spouse, work on communication, and to be able to sit there and share the different effects. Because my wife would probably understand if I told her what I had been through why I may wake up yelling in the middle of the night, or why when she closes the door in the cabinet a little bit too loud, why I get jumpy, or so in this retreat, we talk about many of those things. Education days I'll have to do quick.
I'll just go quickly. We do have education days each year. We have over 18 schools, local schools that join us with between 800 to 1,200 students. They get a tour of the high ground. They learn historical and cultural lessons and the human cost of war. The museum. Well, the museum's mission is the human cost of war as well. We have a lot of items that come in from local families and veterans. We treat everything with a great amount of respect. We not only tell what that artifact is, but we form the whole story of that person that served with that item. We create exhibitions throughout the year. We bring in exhibits such as the one you have out there today, so that's an awesome one. We do documentary projects that we're working on right now. We were there Vietnam War. We're working with around 80 families and veterans of those veterans and families of those that served in the Vietnam War to document their stories.
Thank you.
How's the building coming?
We're getting there. It's like 6 more slides. We do not receive any state or federal funding. This whole park was built by the kindness and generosity, ongoing. This majority of this park was built by the kindness and generosity of many donors, to include many of the programs we do. If we're not able to generate or receive those contributions, then we have events to try to raise money so we can still continue our mission. I'm just going to fly through a couple of these, just the 3 main ones. We have 3 major two-wheel events. The first one is an honor ride. It's on Memorial Day. Motorcycles from all around the United States come to Neillsville. There's just a picture of 2 years. If you would have saw it last year, it was unbelievable. You couldn't see any pavement. There had to have been over 350, 400 bikes. It's unbelievable. And just to hear that sound, oh, it's awesome.
Lots of Harleys.
Well, Harleys, Indians, there was even a couple BMWs. I won't judge. Tom rode his bicycle around the state of Wisconsin. On 1983, 1984, they did their first ride. So we have people from all around Wisconsin that get on a bicycle and ride to the high ground. It's a 2 to 2.5 day ride from Appleton, Cottage Grove. There's a group that comes from La Crosse, New Richmond. I rode with them a couple years ago. And Hayward, I'll probably be riding with them this year. On average, it's 165 to 182 miles from these locations, up and down hills. If you're unlucky like I was, the wind is always in your face. It is the largest and longest running fundraiser. In the teens, in the 2012 to 2019, I think they averaged about $50,000. That just, and they do the fundraising also. They brought in last year was 100,000, 101,000 and some change. And then in September, these are just, I'm just going to scroll through some of these pictures of them. There's about 125 riders total. We'd like to get that up to about 300 just because it's a pretty good show. This year when they come in August 4th, we're also going to be having our Vietnam Veterans Reunion. And then in August 17th this year is our 24th annual Ride to Remember. That ride is specifically to remember those that, you know the person under Zippy?
When was it?
August 4th. Last year we had 300 guests, and we're going to try to get the Huey to fly in again this year, Vietnam Air Huey. Volunteers and contributors make this all possible. There's only a handful of us that work at the High Ground. If it wasn't for the volunteers, there was absolutely no way we'd be able to do what we do and be successful at the same time. The one in the middle is our guard dog. We have too many coins in our pocket. Again, we have 2 work weeks. One is in the spring, and one is in the fall. One is getting the park open. Not open, we're open 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, but getting it cleaned up in the spring, getting the benches and everything pulled out of storage, and then again in the fall. Honor stones. These are 12 by 12 bricks or pavers that have information on them, purchased by the family in honoring of their veteran in their life. There's over 6,300 stones on the property. Each one of these stones has a story. Each one of them has an emotion. More importantly, they all have a connection of service.
And you have look them up in the office.
And you can look them up in the office, or they get read every year. We die twice in our life, once when we take our last breath and once when our name and our stories are told, are not told anymore, or forgotten. So we won't let that happen here. And there's more information about that. So in all of our successes and our growth, we don't have the space to be able to continue to do the things we do. Bet's Guitars, I think, went from the museum to the admin office, from the basement to upstairs. Sometimes during events, we have inclement weather and we're stuck in a 2-car garage, and that's not really conducive to mental health. So from right here to right here is our current building. Originally, we wanted to add 12,000 square foot building on the property to be able to bring everything into one. This was in 2019. We felt that we would be able to raise that money to make that happen. Boom, COVID slapped us right in the face. So the cost of materials and everything went up. That building alone that we were going to build for 2.6 million went to 3.9. Just, there was no way we could have raised that kind of capital. So we went back to the drawing board and we added a 6,000 square foot addition onto this building. Inside there, we'll have a better museum experience. We're adding a chapel and a chaplain exhibit in our existing building. And then there's also going to be room inside of the new building.
Attention, please.
For
The
a
library will be closing in 10 minutes.
indoor meeting space
Please
for
check
about
out
80
any
people. We'll
materials
do
that you'd like to
documentaries,
borrow
guest speakers. And as
We'll
of
be
yesterday,
closing
that's
in
what it
10
looked like.
minutes. Thank you.
Coming along.
Sorry about the timing, folks.
That's okay. You were gonna mention the armor versus what they carried in Vietnam, the extra weight.
So from the Vietnam veteran I talked to, they had their vest zipped or cold folded in the front, and they may or may not have carried a SAPI plate, which is maybe 3 or 4 pounds.
I don't know what they.
It's a bulletproof or a ballistic proof piece of metal that goes inside of the vest.
Okay.
Since we had the IEDs and everything else in Iraq and Afghanistan, you've got this new thing that takes a college education to figure out how to put together. But one button that'll pull it all apart. Well, there's a SAPI plate in the front, back, sides, one around your neck, one protecting your groin. And then you got your day pack with your water, 3-day supply of food, water, bullets, bandages, Band-Aids, and then of course the rifle. So when you add all that extra weight, it's almost like carrying a small child with you everywhere you go.
Don't you guys just keel over from the weight of that?
Training.
Oh my God, in the heat. and
Yeah, I'm 50 years old and I've got arthritis in every joint in my body. No, I'm not saying that didn't have anything to do with other things that I may have done in my life, but I'm attributing it to
Well,
all the extra exertion.
stress.
All stress
Stress
too.
on your joints.
I got a lot of salt and pepper in here, I know that.
Very nice program.
All right, folks, thank you so much. If you have any questions, we might have to do it outside.
Otherwise, you can also direct them to the adult information desk and we'll get the questions and everything to them. So I want to thank you guys. This was very powerful. Learning the stories behind some of these monuments.
Did you want to
It's
have
just so
a paper?